I think it's a little after 9 a.m. And so I would like to, on behalf of the Committee for Dulles, welcome everybody to the Legislative and Economic Development Committee meeting for April the 8th. We are so pleased to have Greg Potts from the Washington Metropolitan Area Transportation Authority, WAMTA, and Keith Jasper from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, NVTA, with us today. Greg is WAMTA's Governmental Relations Officer, and as such is WAMTA's Chief Liaison to Northern Virginia localities and the Commonwealth of Virginia. Greg advocated on behalf of WAMTA at the General Assembly session of 2018 to have the Commonwealth allocate $500 million in annual funding for WAMTA, a significant achievement. Greg also has an extensive background in working for Maryland government, the state government in Maryland, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and a trade association in government affairs. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia, a master's in public policy from George Mason University, and is a graduate of George Washington University's School of Regional Executive Development Program. Keith Jasper is Northern Virginia Transportation Authority's principal for transportation planning and programming. As such, this includes responsibility for updating Transaction, Northern Virginia's multimodal long-range transportation plan, and that occurs every 5 years. He is also responsible for updating NVTA's 6-year plan, and that process occurs every 2 years. In addition, he's also organizes Northern Virginia's Transportation Authority's annual Northern Virginia Transportation Roundtable in association with the Intelligent Transportation System of Virginia, or ITSVA, which is a nonprofit organization and that focuses on intelligent highway and transportation systems. And Keith is also responsible for developing new capabilities, services, and projects, such as the Regional Multimodal Mobility Program. Keith has a background in the US and the UK in both governmental and consultancy positions, and holds a BS in civil engineering from Brighton Polytech in the UK. For the program today, we will have the speakers do their presentation. And then if you will submit any questions via chat, Scott will moderate that and ask the question on your behalf. We're going to keep everybody muted at this point. We're going to start with Greg and follow with Keith. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Potts. Thank you all very much for attending, and we look forward to your questions. At the end, I'll come back on and just let you know about upcoming programs. Thank you.
Sure, thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. This is Greg Potts. I'm with Metro Government Relations, and appreciate the nice intro. That sounded pretty good there. So I'm going to share screen. So if you give me a second, I'm going to get that pulled up for y'all. And it looks like it's up. Can everybody see that?
Yes, it's up.
Thank you. All right. So I thought this morning I would do a little bit of an overview of a few topics And here's kind of the items that I was going to hit on. Of course, the FY22 budget. I know this group is extremely interested in the Silver Line, so we're going to talk a little bit about Silver Line Phase 2. We're going to touch a little bit on COVID safety, of course, because that's at the top of mind to everybody, and then talk a little bit about federal funding, future of transit. So first off, I thought I would hit on the budget, and this is really good news here. So I think you all are very painfully aware of what was proposed for the FY22 budget because it included some pretty significant cuts. I think you all are aware, for this group in particular, it included the closure of a number of metro stations. And that included up to, I believe it was 5 Silver Line stations, which was obviously not popular. And groups in this corridor were advocating very heavily to not have that happen. And I can report that that is not going to happen. And the reason is because we did receive some federal funding, which was extremely good news. We had also proposed some cuts to reduce the service hours of rail. There was some bus cuts and employee layoffs. So it was all of these things that nobody wanted to do. Thankfully, the federal government stepped up again, and they provided some funding that's going to be coming on board in the near future. So if you look at this screen here, you can see that the new budget essentially uses $723 million of federal funding to balance the budget. So that's a little bit of federal funding from the previous round, which is called CRISA, and then from the new round as well. So that is very good news, and that allows us to not have to do all of these extreme cuts that were proposed. And thanks to all of those who advocated as part of the budget process. That was very helpful, I think, for us to hear from you. A little bit about that. So we actually received more comments than we've received in the past 10 years on the budget. And I think it's probably for obvious reasons because there were some pretty significant cuts that were proposed. So we heard from 22,000 people, and it was, most of those were through the online survey, but we also used, there was folks who used the phone, they used written comments, and then also there was oral testimony at the public hearings as well. We did hear from a pretty diverse segment. There was over 5,000 minority respondents, as well as a significant amount that were low income. So that's good, and we do try to get out to those segments of the population as much as possible. So it was good that we were able to do that this year. And again, we held a number of public hearings. There was 4 of them. And there was also public information sessions for stakeholders, like this group and other chambers and other government stakeholders as well. So just to give you a sense of the service, so it's pretty straightforward. Really what we're going to be running for the FY22 year is the same service that we're running now. So it's basically maintaining existing service. If you compare it to the pre-COVID service on the rail side, it's about 80% of what we were running. So that's at the beginning of March last year. So, and you can see the headways that are running. So we're looking at, for the silver for you all, it's 12-minute headways on the weekdays. So that's going to continue throughout the fiscal year. So essentially that begins next July and runs to the end of June of 22. On the bus side, we're running about 85% pre-COVID, and we are going to actually increase some bus service there, which is, I think, good because we found that there's more demand on the bus side that we're seeing. On the rail end, we're down about 90% or a little bit less, maybe 85. But on the bus end, we're down about 60%. So we're finding that there's a lot of demand for a bus, and a lot of that is because these are a lot of frontline workers, individuals who have to rely on transit to get around. They may not have a car. So that's very important service for them. Just a very quick overview of the capital program. I won't spend a lot of time here, but you can see these numbers. So for the 22 year, it's a $2.6 billion program. We have a 6-year program that's $12.3 billion, and then a longer term 10-year plan, which is not necessarily a budget, but it's sort of looking at the out years, what to expect. And you can see on the right side of the slide some of the things that we're working on. Obviously, you've heard about the platform project in Virginia. We hit a number of stations on the Blue Line and the Yellow Line a couple summers ago, 4 outdoor platforms on the Orange Line this past summer. And then we're doing Arlington Cemetery right now and finished the airport. So it was, I think 12 outdoor Virginia platforms have been taken care of with these capital funds. And a lot of that is made possible by dedicated funding, which was passed in 2018. And that's $500 million a year from the region. The Virginia share of that is about $154 million. And those funds really help us to tackle these important projects for safety and for state of good repair. Oh, and also something exciting to mention, this helps fund is the new rail cars. So you might have heard in the press that we awarded a contract for the 8000 series to Hitachi. And so that's going to be, you know, that has been awarded. They've announced that they're going to hopefully have a plant in the region. So that's kind of exciting for the region because it'll create a number of jobs, both indirect and direct. So we're going to be following that, but they've announced they want to build a plant in the region for these rail cars. So that's an exciting project. Next slide here. This is really just the lay of the land on the budget. So you can see what happened in the fall. You know, the budget was introduced and we got a preview way back in October. There was public hearings that were authorized. We went through the public hearing process, I think everyone's aware of, in the middle of February, and that ended in March. And the board is actually acting today. It's actually as we speak, they're in committee right now at this moment talking about the budget. So in the finance committee, they're going to be voting on the budget today. And then in 2 weeks, they're going to act to adopt the full budget 2 weeks from today. So on a Thursday. And then the budget goes into effect, obviously, on the 1st of July. So that wraps up the budget. I thought I'd move on to what I think everybody is probably most interested in this group, and that's Silver Line Phase 2. So just wanted to, I thought this would be helpful to show this graphic here on the right side. If MWA was here, you know, Marcia, she would talk a lot about the progress MWA is making. And of course, we're working very closely with MWA to address all of these outstanding issues. And so I know everybody's aware that MWA announced that they hope to get to substantial completion by Labor Day of this year. And just very quickly to mention what's assumed on Silver Line Phase 2 for the Metro budget, we assume 6 months of revenue and ridership. So essentially revenue and ridership beginning in Q3 of the fiscal year, which is essentially the beginning of next year. So around January of 22. And just a huge caveat there that might be revised depending on the schedule. So let's look at, if you look to the right there at this graphic, I think that's sort of helpful. So you have MWA, and they are saying that hopefully they're going to reach substantial completion by Labor Day, so the third quarter of 21. And then from there, it's not as if, you know, the line just opens immediately after that happens. You know, obviously some things have to happen. So once they achieve substantial completion, it does not mean that everything is done. After that happens, Metro needs to do operational readiness testing. And you can see that, which is in between the ORD and the SC there. And that essentially is up to 60 days. And it's just essentially making sure that everything is good to go from an operational standpoint from the Metro point of view. So that period is up to 60 days. Once Metro believes that we are at that ORD there that you see, then there's a 90-day period that occurs, and that is by contract with MWA, and that is pre-revenue activities. And the next slide speaks to a little bit about what that includes, but that is a 90-day period. So the long and short of it is, if MWA completes, gets to substantial completion by Labor Day, then you essentially have a 5-month period of the testing and the pre-revenue. So our GM has said publicly that we expect revenue service to begin potentially in February of next year. And again, lots of caveats there, all depends on the MWA schedule, but that is the timeline that we have given out that we hope to achieve. And again, it depends on the schedule. And so this just gives you an idea of all the things that need to occur in that 90 days. You might think to yourself, oh, that's a long time, but there is a lot of things that Metro has to do. You can see this extremely long list here. So there's the onboarding of the assets. There's a lot of things that you have to do there. It's obviously 6 new stations. There's a lot of things to do. First responders need to have their training. You know, for example, Loudoun County first responders, Fairfax, there's 3 Fairfax stations and 3 Loudoun stations, so they need to be familiar. And they've already done some of that, but that'll continue. Final documentation, safety certification, various policy updates, and then also the final station mobilization. So that includes marketing, it includes updating all the maps. So if you think about it, we have to update every single map in the entire system, even in Maryland, you know, of course. So you have to do a complete revamp of the maps on the rail cars in the system. And you can imagine that's a fairly big job. And then also the fare equipment has to be updated. So it's a pretty long list. These are examples of things that are going to happen in the pre-revenue period. So that is sort of from the Metro point of view. Obviously, MWA can give a lot of information about the status of the project itself, but that is sort of an overview from the Metro point of view. And these slides are actually taken directly, these are public slides, and these are taken directly from the last update that Metro gave to our board. We give periodic updates. I think it's at least every 2 months, if not monthly at this point, where we go to our board and give an update. And those slides are online. I can share it with the group if anybody hasn't seen it. There's a link to the slides at the Metro site. Very quick, just to talk a little bit about COVID. You know, obviously it's been affecting us for a very long time now. Here are some of the things that we're doing to protect the public. An interesting one here, we received an FTA grant for a pilot for improved air filtration on the rail cars. You know, we have a certain level of air filtration, but obviously it can get better. And that is helpful to customers to not only reassure them, but, you know, to make sure that, you know, the air is clean and it's recirculated. So that's kind of an exciting thing. We got some federal money to study that with some improvements there. We do a lot of cleaning, as a lot of other transits do, you know, obviously daily, on demand. We require face coverings, as you probably know, and we hand out face coverings as well as hand sanitizer. We did an interesting partnership with the Greater Washington Partnership, a real-time crowding tool, and it's called a transit tracker. I can share the link later, but essentially it helps you to see how crowded the rail cars are to help you in your commute and to see, and also on the bus side too. So that's kind of interesting. As folks come back to work, they can kind of see what's going on in the system so they can feel more comfortable, and it's real time. So that's kind of a neat thing. And then also, of course, the workforce. We have unfortunately had several employees who have died from COVID. So obviously it's front of mind. We've had a lot of individuals who have been sick. We do a lot of testing. We're, of course, working with Virginia and Maryland, the district, on the vaccinations, and that's moving forward. And in Virginia in particular, that's moving forward pretty well. There's some challenges up in Maryland. They actually have an on-site vaccination center through FEMA that they're doing up in Maryland at the Greenbelt station. So that's kind of neat. And that started up yesterday. And that's open to a lot of, it's focused really on Prince George's County. And so that's happening. And then just a few other things on our workforce, you know, obviously, as far as offices, you know, want to make sure that that's safe as well. And then visitors coming into our offices too. So this is obviously front of mind for us and for everyone else in the region. And this is really the last section here, just talking about a federal update. This is the one that I was mentioning earlier. This is the latest round of federal funding. It's called the American Rescue Plan Act. And it was signed, I think everyone knows, over the winter period. Federal legislation, $30.5 billion for transit. The region is expected to receive about $1.4 billion, and that's not just Metro. That includes Maryland Transit, and that includes, for example, VRE, PRTC, which is in Prince William, and So of course, Metro will receive a portion of this funding. We don't know the exact amount, but that's already been, we've already essentially put in a placeholder of those funds to help balance the FY22 budget. So obviously extremely good news. Thankful to the delegation for all the support and to the region for support on that as well. So thank you. The second one down there is the federal, what's called PREA. Some of you might be familiar with this. This is something that was originally passed back a little bit over 10 years ago. Former Congressman Davis helped us out on this, and it essentially provided $150 million in federal funds annually, matched by the region, $50 million per jurisdiction. So it was a total of $300 million. That's continued, but the authorization has expired. They've been doing 1-year extensions for the past, I believe, 2 years, but a long-term reauthorization has been introduced, and that was the area delegation. So on the House side, that was Connolly, who's been, of course, very supportive. And on the Senate side, it was Senator Warner. So it was the Virginia gang that was helping us out there, and very supportive also from the region, from the business community like this group and many other groups. So thank you for the support on that. And the bills provide, they're a little bit different, but essentially they provide $2 billion in federal funding over 10 years. And again, there would be a match from the region. And then also there's some funding in there for Metro's Office of Inspector General, which is important. So that's something that is important to the federal government, to make sure that we have a robust Office of Inspector General, and we agree with that. So we support that. So that's really the federal end. That's going to play out on the PREA end, but that's very important for the capital budget. So we hope that moves forward, of course. And then final slide here. This is just really kind of a future-looking slide. Our GM has been talking a lot about this, that there's obviously a lot of travel patterns that have been changing. It's going to require potentially rethinking transit and to really monitor the trends that are happening in the region. And we need to continue to working with folks on this. The standard 9 to 5, Monday through Friday peak period is probably not going to occur in the near future. I mean, for obvious reasons, people are very likely going to continue to be teleworking. Everyone knows this, you know, potentially 2-3 days a week. So that's going to kind of change ridership on Metro. So maybe it's not as heavy anymore as it was in the 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. period and the mornings and then evenings, but then maybe there's more ridership in the evenings or on the weekends, you know, as you know, leisure and other jobs that are not those standard 9 to 5 jobs. So I think, as our GM has said, we need to meet the riders where they are and kind of pivot to that as well. So that's going to require a lot of partnerships, and it's going to be challenging. And there's revenue issues here because obviously we have a lot of revenue that's down because of the ridership that's down significantly. So that is something that our board is going to be tackling in our GM. So that was it for me, and I will just say thank you, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions at the end. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Greg. We very much appreciated that. Keith, it's on your watch. I'm assuming you're getting your slides up now.
Good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction earlier, Anita. It's very kind words you said. I'm going to kind of complement what Greg has said by looking at access to the Silver Line stations from a non-rail perspective. Before I get into that, for those of you who may not be completely familiar with NVTA, we have two primary responsibilities. As Anita mentioned, our long-range transportation plan we call Transaction, updated every 5 years, and the current version was adopted in October of 2017. And our 6-year program, which we update every 2 years. The really, really important thing to keep in mind here is that although our long-range plan looks out 20, 25 years, As soon as it's adopted, which for the current update we're working on is expected to be towards the end of next calendar year, we will begin funding projects that are in the project list associated with that plan from calendar 23 onwards. So it's a long-range plan, but it's directly linked to what we can fund. If projects are not included in our long-range plan, then we cannot fund them through our 6-year program. Also, just like to mention our vision statement. I kind of drill this into my staff that this is why we exist. This is what we're paid to do. This is what we're trying to accomplish. That Northern Virginia will plan for and invest in a safe, equitable, sustainable, and integrated multimodal transportation system that enhances quality of life, strengthens the economy, and builds resilience. This is fairly recently approved. And this is what we're aiming to accomplish with our transaction update and ultimately the projects that we fund. Also, I just want to give a few highlights here. Important to keep in mind that NVTA's revenues are allocated into a 70% fund for regional projects and a 30% fund which we pass through to our 9 member jurisdictions for them to use on transportation projects at their own discretion. So mostly I'm going to talk about our regional revenues, although I'll come back to our 30% or local revenues towards the end. Since our funding stream was activated on July 1 of 2013, we've allocated nearly $2.5 billion to 106 projects in Northern Virginia, of which $273.5 million has gone to 16 projects in the Silver Orange Line corridor in Northern Virginia, and an additional $63.5 million to the 4 Route 28 widening projects, which are closest to the Silver Line corridor between Sterling Boulevard and Route 50. So getting on for $1/3 billion, actually slightly more than $1/3 billion, NVTA is allocated to projects in this corridor. And in the future, now we've got a fairly stabilized 6-year program, which is updated every 2 years. We expect to be able to allocate an estimated $500 million every 2 years moving forward. And our next call for projects is actually probably just a few months away now. So, on balance, I would say if you could take one major takeaway, NVTA has done a lot in this corridor and across the region, but as I'll highlight in a few slides, there is still much that is left to be done. So just wanted to work through the corridor, starting actually on the joint Orange Silver Line segment, starting from Roslyn and then moving west. Roslyn Station, we've invested in multimodal improvements in the station area that are designed to help bike and foot traffic access the station area more conveniently and safely. At Ballston MU, we funded design work for a second entrance to the station on the west side of the station, which will increase the catchment area and make that station more accessible to folks who live in the region or who work in the region around that station. At East Falls Church, we have a couple of projects in conjunction with Nova Parks that look at increasing the capacity of the WNOD trail. We have one project in the city of Falls Church, which is looking like it'll be open in early summer, and another project in Arlington County on the east side of the station, which is not yet underway, but we'll initially look at some preliminary planning and design work. At West Falls Church, a couple of fairly significant projects in the city of Falls Church that will improve access in conjunction with other improvements at the west end of the city of Falls Church, and a second project there which will improve access from the WNOD trail to that joint campus development that's adjacent to West Falls Church. And I know this isn't in the Silver Line corridor, but I just want to make a note that at Dunloring Metro Station, there's a pilot project that NVTA is not funding, but is watching very closely for a pilot test of an autonomous transit vehicle, which is shuttling on public roads between Dunloring Metro Station and the Mosaic District, including a crossing of Route 29. It is a pilot, but it is something that is of great interest to us going forwards. So moving a little further west onto the phase 1 of the Silver Line at Spring Hill Station, we have funded a couple of projects on Route 7, one that's now complete, which involved widening the bridge over the Dulles Toll Road. But in addition to that, adding some really nice, safe, segregated bike and pedestrian trails on both sides of 7, which will, in conjunction with the Route 7 widening from that location to Reston, when that's complete, will provide continuous bike ped trails along that entire corridor, which will hopefully improve access for folks in that region to the Spring Hill Station. In addition, I'd mentioned the Envision Route 7 BRT project, which NVTA funded an early study on. And since then, the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission has taken forward through various additional studies and early design work or preliminary engineering work. Fairfax County is looking in particular at routing through the Tysons area at the western or northwestern end of that project, and that they've identified 3 alternatives, a couple of which will terminate at the Spring Hill Station. So we think at some point in the future there'll be a BRT, a bus rapid transit connection between Metro Rail at Spring Hill Station. Moving to the Wheelie-Reston Avenue Station, just west of the station, Fairfax County is looking at a project to extend Soapstone Drive over the Dulles Toll Road, but without connecting to the Dulles Toll Road, which will greatly assist in completing the kind of street grid network around that station, which I'm sure many of you have used and know that can get really congested, at least pre-pandemic. And this connector will greatly help mobility around the station, as well as connecting the north and south sides of Reston Town Centre, thereby taking a lot of pressure off Wheelie Avenue and also Reston Parkway to the west of that location. So moving out to the Silver Line Phase 2 stations, I'll skip over Reston Town Centre and come back to that in just a moment. In the vicinity of Herndon Station, we're funding a couple of projects to improve access to that station, one involving bus bays, pedestrian improvements immediately off Herndon Parkway, and then an intersection improvement slightly west of the station on the northern side. The Innovations Centre Station, a small piece of transportation geekiness trivia for you. The Innovations Centre Station is actually funded by NVTA. It's one of 2 Metro Rail stations that NVTA is funding. As you drive past that, you can see it's ostensibly complete, obviously waiting the readiness and other testing that Greg mentioned earlier. But from our point of view, our involvement in that station is substantially over. And just to the west of that station, between the station and the CIT building, Rock Hill Road extension is another project that Fairfax County is looking at, which again crosses the Dulles Toll Road, provides good access from south of the toll road to the north of the toll road, which apart from taking a lot of pressure off of Route 28, opens up that area as well for a lot of development. And I'm sure we all heard the announcement a couple of days ago about Rivanna, and that station and when built, the Rock Hill Road Bridge will provide great access at the eastern end of that development. So looking a little bit further west into Loudoun County, for the two stations there, we have a couple of projects, again, looking to improve and complete the street grid system, really between the Ashburn and Loudoun Gateway stations on the north side of the Silver Line. These not only provide great access to the stations, but also, as I say, improve the street grid, effectively open up area for growth in the future. So those projects are advancing with Loudoun County. Some other projects I'd like to mention just quickly, beyond the Route 28 projects that I mentioned at the beginning, there are a number of other Route 28 projects further south in Fairfax County and in Prince William County, which I can't say are directly in the Silver Line corridor, but they will no doubt improve mobility and accessibility from further south and west along the Route 28 corridor towards the Dulles Airport and the Dulles corridor. In addition, some similar projects on Fairfax County Parkway and Loudoun County Parkway as well. So these are all north-south projects in various stages of development at the moment, and near construction in one case. The 30% funds I mentioned briefly at the beginning. In a lot of cases, our member jurisdictions choose to commingle, as it were, the 30% funds with the regional funds, the 70% funds, which is really great to see that projects can achieve both regional and local functionality, and that's reinforced by commingling those funds from NVTA. There are a number of station access projects and parking and bus bay projects that our member jurisdictions are using with their 30% funds. I haven't mentioned those directly, but for instance, the parking garages at Herndon and Innovation are projects that are being funded or enhanced by Fairfax County's 30% revenues from NVTA. And in addition, a number of our member jurisdictions use their 30% revenues to make capital and subsidy payments to Armada as well. So I mentioned at the beginning that much had been done, but there was much to do. And just to give you some examples of these here, a couple of stations, sorry, 3 stations, all of these in Fairfax County. The Wheelie Reston East Station, I did mention the Soapstone Drive extension. There's a big request that was made to NVTA for a fairly substantial project. NVTA has allocated 15 million so far, and there's 8.2 million from NVTA's 30% revenues that Fairfax County has allocated, but there's still quite a considerable shortfall, I understand, on this project before it can reach the construction stage. So, big work to be done there. Reston Town Centre Station, Fairfax County has a project to extend the the Town Centre Parkway using an underpass under the Dulles Toll Road, again connecting both sides of the toll road, and this is obviously immediately to the west of the Reston Town Centre Station. And I think there was a public information meeting on that project jointly between Fairfax and VDOT yesterday, I think. And at the Innovations Centre Station, Rock Hill Road Bridge I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more funding needed to bring that station to conclusion as well. Just quickly, some other related initiatives. Some of you may be aware of the VDOT Strategically Targeted Affordable Roadway Solutions, or STARS study, which completed in 2020 in partnership with Fairfax and Loudoun Counties, M1 and the Dulles Greenway. And this is looking at a narrow section of Route 28 between Frying Pan Road and Sterling Boulevard. And that came up with, I think, more than a dozen low scale, small scale projects, low cost projects that none of which, to my knowledge, are funded at this time, but all of which are potentially beneficial for access in the Silver Line corridor. And I can't go into any detail on this because we're not involved in it, but we are certainly aware that both Fairfax Connector and Loudon Transit are working diligently on restructuring of local transit service to coincide with the opening of the phase 2 stations. Some ongoing activities at NVTA that are relevant. Transactions been mentioned a couple of times. We're currently updating that project list. It's still in a draft form at the moment, but as I mentioned earlier, if projects are not included in that project list when transaction is adopted in 2022, we will not be able to fund them through subsequent funding programs. We will be beginning public engagement in the spring of this year and adoption in November of 22. Our next 6-year program, we're calling the fiscal year 22 to 27 6-year program. The call for projects will be this summer and the adoption is expected next summer. Technology has been mentioned a couple of times, and particularly in the context of the pandemic. This has become really important. We're working on a strategic plan for transportation technology across the entire region. We are looking for the authority to approve that in May of this year, and if that approval is granted, then we'll begin implementing that technology plan pretty quickly. The Regional Multimodal Mobility Programme is an effort jointly NVTA undertaking with the Commonwealth of Virginia, applies region-wide, and indeed, in fact, will be extended south of Northern Virginia to, in the 95 corridor to the Fredericksburg area. So we're quite excited about that, which is really looking at technology approaches to meeting the region's mobility, accessibility, and reliability issues on transportation. So that deployment will begin in a very small way later this year, but will accelerate over subsequent years. Couple more slides. At this evening's NVTA meeting, there'll be a presentation on the economic impact of NVTA's revenues to date. Top left-hand corner, we're showing 3.3 billion, which is comprised of 2.5 billion in regional revenues and about 800 million in the local 30% revenues. And just the quick key takeaways: 30,000 jobs are estimated to be created by that funding. The one that excites me actually the most is the travel time savings, the value of time savings associated with just the 2.5 billion in regional revenues will generate 3 billion plus in monetized cost savings by 2030. In other words, we'll generate more in travel time savings than the cost of these projects 7 years from now. And keeping in mind that some of those projects won't even be opening until towards the end of this decade, that's a pretty great return on investment, I think. And obviously those projects will continue to provide those returns after 2030. And then the final key takeaway is the momentum that the 2.5 billion regional revenues, leverages other committed investments of a greater amount, and another 2 billion or 1.9 billion will be forthcoming to bring those projects to completion. So, the region is working really well together at the state, regional, local level to really leverage everyone's money to achieve these projects. And finally, I just want to mention Nova Gateway. This is a dashboard we put together last year. And if you want to find out more information about any of NVTA's projects, just go to novagateway.org, and you can, when you're there, you can filter by project sponsor, location, segment, and mode. The Gateway dashboard only includes projects that are actually under a project agreement with us, which is not every project. But we're not using the Gateway to track projects which are not yet under an agreement with us, but as soon as they are, we add them to this system. It's a great way to get good information, and this is in the process of being enhanced. So it will be upgraded during the course of this year and subsequently. I think with that, I thank you very much for your attention and a few contact points, and look forward to any questions that you may have.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate the presentations. And if you both don't have any issues, I will take your PowerPoints, convert it into PDF and send it out to our membership, because I think it's excellent information for us. We do have questions, and ladies and gentlemen, we have scheduled this meeting to end by about 10 o'clock. So we'll do our best to get these questions in. The first is from Evan Koppel, who says, taking the pandemic out of the equation, it seems like panel cracks, ballast, software issues, etc., have been discussed for 3 years. Is that really the cause of delays, and have they finally come to a resolution on them? It seems like every year we are back to the same discussion on why we are delayed. Again, pandemic aside. Very excited for this to start, and critical to Dulles Airport. So Greg, any comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think everyone, as I mentioned, I think everyone's pretty aware that the Airports Authority is managing the contract, is managing the project. So if Marsha was here, she would talk all about that. You know, obviously they're working through a lot of concerns, a lot of issues, you know, that I mentioned. We're working closely with them. Everybody, of course, wants to move things forward, but of course, Metro is not going to accept a project that's not safe and that's not to standards. So, you know, that is obviously a very important thing. It's a long-term asset that we're going to have for many years. So just want to make sure, you know, of course, that, you know, all those boxes are checked. So working with them closely, and as I mentioned, you know, we don't largely control much before they reach substantial completion. So, you know, as I mentioned on the slide, you know, they're hoping to get there by Labor Day. After that date, then Metro controls a little more, because we're doing the scheduling and all that and all the testing. But really just making sure, and, you know, of course, we're a huge partner. We want MWAT to get there too. So we're all working together on that.
Great. Thank you. And I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for those that came on after the start of the meeting. If you have any questions, please send them via chat. The next is from Dave Kirby regarding the innovation station. And again, this will probably be yours, Greg. What's being done in terms of signage for folks to get them to the entrance to Innovation Station? And in particular, the other concern is, how are we going to manage to keep people from utilizing the street to park, so that we're not creating a nightmare for Rock Hill Road?
So that one, I don't know. I actually tried to phone a friend earlier from the project team to see if he had any insight on that. I don't know the specific answer to that. I don't know if, I mean, some folks even on this call may know some of the answers to that. So I did ask the project team, but I don't have an answer to that right now.
Okay, thank you. Is this something really in the hands right now of the project, or is this going to be under WAMTA's responsibility, the signage issue?
Well, I mean, ultimately, Metro will own the signage, but yes, it's the project team, you know, working on that. I can find out the answer to this more. I don't have an answer right now.
Okay. All right, very good. Let's see. To get to Reston Town Center Station, a walker has to cross Sunrise, which is a major road and busy in the morning, and there is no overhead walkway. Any plans to migrate the dangers mitigate the dangers at the station? I guess I'm going to interpret that as any ability to utilize the station as the walkway from one side to the other, so people can get off of Sunrise.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have an answer to this one right now either. I sent an email to the project team on this one as well.
Okay.
I actually don't know personally if that would be a Fairfax County thing or a project team, so we can look at that one.
Hi,
Okay.
this is Martha Quill from Fairfax County DOT. I'm the Special Projects Division Chief and Delaware Project Manager for Fairfax County. I just wanted to mention, I saw the question.
We're having a hard time hearing you, Martha.
Oh, hi, sorry. I'll try to speak up. Is that a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm the Delaware Project Manager for Fairfax County. There is a light planned at and actually installed on Sunrise. Sunrise Valley is the south side of this. We do have improvements to Edmund Haley that allow with a walkway and trail leading to the Reston Town Center Station south side. On the north side, there's Sunset Hills where there is a signal with a crossing for pedestrians.
Martha, unfortunately, you're kind of going in and out, and it's very difficult to pick up what you're hearing. Could you potentially send us your message via chat and I can read it? Wow. She went on mute. All right. Let's see.
Sure.
From Anita, let's see. Greg, she is asking, in the rethinking of future commuting patterns, will that include different time of day for train frequency, i.e. earlier or later in the day?
Yeah, not necessarily earlier or later in the day, but one thing that we've discussed is, you know, in the past, pre-pandemic, we ran more frequent service during the peak periods. So for example, you'd run 6-minute headways from 6 a.m. to 9 or something like that. And then from 3 to 6, you'd run, the same thing. What I think we're looking at is that people are traveling now and probably in the future and all throughout the day. So you might look at actually having standard headways just the entire day. So just sort of a rethinking of some of those things. As far as the hours, we would look at adjusting those as the demand starts up. Right now, I think I mentioned we're at, we close at 11. And so in the past, we closed at midnight on the weekdays. So we might, do that again if the ridership picks up. So I think it's something that the board has to tackle. They're going to be following this pretty closely. And then with the budget, as the year goes on, there's probably going to be an opportunity for them, if they want, to go back and amend the budget, make some changes if ridership is picking up, those sorts of things. So I think that there's a strong possibility that there could be some tweaks here and there in service, but we really just have to watch ridership and, see what happens and then adjust to that.
Okay, thank you. And Martha sent a message in response to the previous question. She says, on the south side, improvements have been completed to Sunrise Valley and Edmund Hawley, including sidewalk, trails, and bike lane leading to the south side entrance to the station. On the north side, a signal with pedestrian crossing will facilitate crossing Sunset Hills Road. Both sides of the station are equipped with knockout panels that will allow for future pedestrian bridge connections as development occurs in the area. All right, let's see. Keith, this question is for you from Anita. Is NVTA working with NVTC and localities looking at transit frequency increase based on demand for the Phase 2 Silver Line rail to new stations, and when more bus service?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Anita. NVTA is working with NVTC and other regional partners on a number of things. Just to kind of reinforce what Greg was saying earlier about the post-pandemic new normal demand patterns and how we kind of right-size transportation systems to match a potential smoothing of of peak demand in particular, which obviously is the critical one around which most design decisions are made. We've done our own analysis of the pandemic, and this is something we're continuing to look at closely. We're seeing the same patterns on the highway side as well. In terms specifically of transit planning activities, we've actually, under our transaction work, we've recently kicked off an internal working group which is looking at a network of bus rapid transit projects in the region. So we're looking, we're a regional body, we're looking at a regional scale. Many of our member jurisdictions and their transit agencies are really dealing at the local level with local needs. There's not really a role that we can play there. They're much more expert at that, and it's what they do best. So we're looking at things which generally cross regional boundaries, and we're looking at them at a network basis. So we want to understand how BRT can interconnect with other BRT lines as well as metro rail lines to get the best kind of optimization of the system as we can, while meeting as much demand as we can, and making transit an attractive alternative to driving, particularly driving alone. So that effort is underway as part of the development of transaction, and it will manifest itself over the coming months in a draft project list of projects which together, when implemented together, make up a system that we think will be for the greater good of Northern Virginia.
Okay. Thank you. And Greg and Keith, thank you for your time today. We certainly appreciate your presentations. We have recorded this meeting, which we will make available on a public platform, but is really meant for our membership. With that, Anita, I will turn it back over to you.
And I just wanted to add my thanks to both Keith and Greg for the presentation today, and for all the great questions from some of the attendees. I just want to mention two things coming up for the Committee for Dulles. One is our golf tournament on April 26th. And if you have any questions or are interested, please contact Scott. And the other is on May 6th, we'll be having another Economic Development and Legislative Committee meeting. This one will be, our three speakers will be from Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William County's Economic Development offices. And so please join us May 6th, 9 a.m. for an update on what's going on economic development wise in the local jurisdictions. Thank you all for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you all again.